Welcome everybody to another ClickIt webinar. I will be your host today. I'm Alzette, and with me I have Lisselle. She is Head of Design. Today we will be discussing email newsletter design, best practices for email newsletter design. And after the webinar, we will allow for a quick Q&A. And so if you have any questions, post it in the question box and we will answer that afterwards. And finally, we are recording this webinar. So if you get lost during the webinar or if you have to check out, no problem. We will load it on our YouTube channel and I will send a recording afterwards and you can access that there along with the design guide. Okay, welcome Lisselle. I'm very excited to go through the webinar best practices with you today.
Thank you, Alzette. I'm very happy to be here again and welcome to the world of newsletter design. And before we start, I just want to include that we're currently working from home, so please ignore the dogs or any odd background noises you may hear.
Great, I think everyone is used to that by now. Okay, I'm going to start off, and this is just to go through the newsletter components with you. So you will see the anatomy of a newsletter in the image on your screen. The first one is the header, and if you look down, there's B, a footer, C, the compliance block, and D is your drag and drop area where the body content will be. I'm just going to go through this in a bit more detail. So the header section is where you usually insert a few elements such as the logo. So this is very important so that your readers will actually know where this newsletter is coming from. Have your company logo right there in the top. Also, include the company color scheme, the look and feel. You will see in bullet point number 2, there is some purple in there, and that's our company color. So just to stay with your company colors, that's a great idea in your newsletter design. Then number 3, website tabs. This could be inserted either at the top or at the bottom. So there's no preference there. If you want to include all your website tabs, you can. If you don't want to include any, that's completely up to you, or just a few. Then number 4, we go to the header design. So it's advisable to use that header design to make it relevant to the actual newsletter. So if, for example, you have a big sale coming up or sending a newsletter about a sale, make this a big resemblance of that. And then number 5, the headline text. This can be the same as your newsletter subject line, or you can make it just the first topic of your newsletter. It's up to you. And then number 6, you will see the mailer date. Our system drags in the date automatically. So it's always nice to see the exact date of when the newsletter was received. Then moving on to number B, or the letter B. That's the footer detail. And in this section, you can include the website tabs or at the top, like I said previously. Number 2, you will see generic contact details. This is very important to keep that in there. A telephone number, you don't have to put in the mobile. If you want to, you can. Email address, very important. And your website address. Also, your physical address can be put in there. And then number 3, this is your social media icons. So when a recipient will click on these icons, they will go to your social media pages where they clicked on to follow or like that page. And that's also completely optional. You can include that or just have some of them in or all of them. Okay, moving on to the compliance block. So this is to be PAPAIA compliant. Everyone knows by now what PAPAIA means. This is where your physical address is inserted. So this is not optional, this is compulsory. And every email newsletter that you do send through our server or system does have this block included. So your physical address is the one that's included in the account details. And then obviously the opt-out link is very, very important. This is your unsubscribe link. So that all the recipients have the option to unsubscribe if they do not want to receive your newsletter. The sent from address must also be shown here. This is where it is sent from. I would say use something like newsdesk at your domain name, or a news, not too generic like info or bookings, or that's a bit too generic. But just make sure that this address is email address that is monitored. So if someone replies to this newsletter directly, they will receive it in this inbox. Okay, and then also optional, you will see there is also social media icons, and this is not your social media icons. This is to share this to social media channels or to the email, but you can see the icon there. Okay, and then we have the D component, which is your drag and drop editor. So our server have this drag and drop functionality where you can drag in your images, content, put in your links, call to action, put in your colors, style it, just like you would normally do in a newsletter. So this is number one. You will see the image, but there's also other options. So you can drag in, for example, 3 images next to each other, or 2 images, or 1 image and the text next to it. So that's completely up to you. Then make the image relevant to the actual content of that section that you have. So that specific topic of discussion. Number 2 is a headline text. Always have that on top there for the beginning of the paragraph, so that everyone knows what it's going to be about. Then number 3 is your supporting content. You don't have to make this too long. Short and sweet is actually the key. We'll discuss this a little bit later. And then the rest of the content can be loaded on a blog or on a website page, and you can click through to that. So number 4 is the call to action button, and this takes you to the actual website or the full article, for example. Then if you have HTML knowledge, you can actually HTML code the entire newsletter in this section. You do not need to use the drop editor, but it is very straightforward and it's very easy. Okay, now that we have the entire layout, I'm going to pass over to Lisel to discuss the content and the text, HTML text, everything in a little bit more detail. Over to you, Lisel.
Thank you, Elzate. Most of the rules and specifications that we've discussed in our previous webinar about emails, signature designs, applies to the newsletter designs too. We're going to start off with the pasteboard specifications. The basics are actually more or less the same. Number 1, the newsletter must be designed in RGB color format on a 72 dpi pasteboard and should display correctly on 100% zoom view. Often, we as graphic designers make the mistake of starting on a print-based canvas. Unfortunately, it is ingrained in our training as graphic designers to start big and work towards a smaller size if needed. So designing for email is a bit of a mind shift. Please, please, please do not start on 300 dpi and resize smaller. Start on 72 dpi. Then a tip, if you want to see how your newsletter would display in 72 dpi, open and view the file in a browser. If your zoom is set at 100% zoom, that is the file size of how your newsletter would display. Then number 2, the width of the email newsletter is different to email signatures. The content width, which includes the photos, the body copy, and links, but not the background, must be within the 600 pixels to ensure that your email newsletter renders well in every client on any device. Then we're going to run through the background specifications. When we refer to the background, we refer to the area outside of the 600 pixels. Number 2, it's best to only make use of solid color backgrounds. No gradients or images are allowed. Usually the only place where gradients are allowed are on the image area blocks within the newsletter content. Then number 3, if you want to add a border or a frame, you may do so, but please make sure to make use of solid lines or solid pixel lines. Then we move on to the design layout rules. Number 1, the newsletter content will either be added using the drag and drop method, as discussed by LZ earlier, or coded in basic HTML. So it's best to follow a grid or table column layout. Number 2, it's best to stick to single column layouts. You will notice on the screen a sample of a single column newsletter designed for desktop. So what is a single column layout, you may ask? It is a layout which follows a visual hierarchy where all the elements are placed below each other from top to bottom. It works great for desktop and mobile. Then number 3, now you'll see the mobile version of the same newsletter on the screen. Single column layouts ensure that your emails are optimized for mobile and will scale the text and images accordingly to fit the mobile width. Again, you will notice the important information are easily distinguishable from subtext. It just helps consumer navigate the emails without overwhelming them. Then we're going to move on to images. The file sizes, number 1, should be as small as possible and optimized while meeting the quality requirements. Our newsletter images are referenced. So the smaller the file size, the faster the images would download and the faster the email would display in full. Number 2, the file formats may be in JPEG, PNG, GIF, and animated GIFs. Number 3, newsletters make use of a very basic HTML code, so it won't display or allow any executable scripts like Flash or embedded videos to be inserted. As an alternative suggestion, you can however link your videos, which means you can add a static image of your video with a play button design over it, enticing people to click on it. When click, it will redirect your video to the YouTube page where your video is loaded, for example. Then number 4, and again, because the background doesn't allow for any gradient or images, all images must fit within the newsletter content width. Then we move on to fonts. Did you know that a busy recipient spends about 7 seconds viewing your email? And most email clients do not display the newsletter images by default because newsletters are mostly referenced. The recipients needs to download the images, and some recipients will not download those images. Therefore, it's not best practice to load one entire image as a newsletter. You will need a backup plan in order to catch the recipient's attention, and one solution is system fonts. So what are system fonts? They are the fonts that come pre-installed along with your device's operating system when you buy it brand new out of the box, whether it's a PC, a laptop, or a mobile device. We've listed the system fonts for you to note on the screen. So why use system fonts? If you want to guarantee that your recipients view your newsletter exactly as it was designed, and more importantly, read your newsletter, it's beneficial to include system fonts where fonts are used in your design. The pros just outweigh the cons in the end. And on the screen, we've also compiled the font sizes for you to use for your design into a conversion chart between the Photoshop font sizes and the email font sizes. So using this, try to make use of HTML text where text content is used in order to show up in plain text newsletters. And again, all body text, dates, headlines, text links, and contact details must be in a system font in order to show up in plain text newsletter versions. If you add a non-system font headline or a headline on a photo, it will be loaded as an image and will not display if the recipient hasn't downloaded the images yet. Then another pro tip, when you design and load a transparent newsletter for dark mode, all standalone HTML coded text will invert or adapt the colors with 70% accordingly, depending if you're working in dark mode or light mode. Then we're going to move to the last 3 things that you need to consider when designing HTML text formats. Because text is coded in basic HTML text, no leading or tracking can be applied. You must disable that setting in your Photoshop to 0% for the most accurate results. Then number 2, although clients love to suggest the use of text icons like webdings or wingdings, icon fonts aren't installed on any mobile device. They will not render at all on mobile devices, so it's advisable to stay completely away from them. And then number 3, Again, all HTML text box backgrounds must be a solid color. No shading, patterns, or watermarks allowed. Creative elements such as icons, logos, or brand elements are only allowed in the image box areas. Then to conclude my part of the discussion, ultimately you want to prioritize function over form. Having a flashy design is nice and all, but it won't matter if half the design is it will not display due to the software HTML restrictions, which could have otherwise have been avoided. Sorry. Back to LZ.
Thanks, Lasal. That is a mouthful, but like I mentioned previously, don't be discouraged. It's not complicated. And we are recording this webinar, so you can go back and watch all these slides in detail again. I'm just going to move on to a few tips for effective newsletter design. So hopefully this will be the actual advice that will improve your open and click rates for you. Okay, so number one is organize your newsletter. So like Lasal mentioned, we are lazy and we only read 15 seconds of a newsletter. So prioritize your content to make sure that it's short and sweet, and then the most important topic of discussion is first and going down to the less important stuff. Then number two, don't overclutter. I think we can't stress this enough. The most effective newsletters are those with clear messages. So if you have a lot to say in one newsletter, it's advisable to rather send a series of newsletters, or if you've got different promotions that you would like to do, make sure that you have certain content and then link it to a website page with the major content on that. So like Lasal mentioned, we are lazy creatures. We don't like to read too much. Okay, so less text, use imagery. It's very important. Number three, make use of links. Like I just mentioned, one or two catchphrases that will grab the attention of your reader, and then link it to your website or your blog page with all the information on. Then number four, break it up for easy viewing. If your email features different types of content, clearly make sections for it. So you will see here on the image, there's a light gray line between the social media icons and the text above. So this is just to make sure that the reader knows that it's two separate sections. You can also use headings, and that helps with those people that only scan and skim. Okay, number five, use your corporate identity and palette. So it's very important to make sure that you use familiar colors to the readers so that they know where it's coming from. So they, when they receive your newsletter and they read it, they know exactly it's your company, it's your logo, all of your corporate identity elements are in there. Okay, number six, align your content. So if your content is minimal, one large photo works best. Center aligning your content will work the best. If you have more content, rather left align it to make it more legible. And always keep alignment consistent across the entire email for email harmony. Then number seven, keep it legible. We recommend setting the body text size within the 12 to 18 pixel range, and 12 pixels for longer emails and 18 pixels if you've got a short newsletter, just 2 or 3 sentences. Number 8, know your call to actions. And the call to action, this is the most important thing that will affect your click rate. So link readers to external contents and motivate them to actually click on it. So buy now or sign up now, like you will see in the image here on the screen. The two main call to actions there are add to calendar and join webinar. And you will see that it's difficult to miss it. So add to calendar, it's very straightforward. The reader knows exactly what to do. When they click on it, will add to their calendar. make use of colors when you design your call to action to make it stand out. And you'll also notice on the image, there's a lot of white space around the call to action. So this is also just a tip to make it stand out. Then number 9 is a subject line, and this is the most important thing that will affect your open rate. So do not make it too lengthy. The sweet spot is actually between 6 and 10 words. If you have more to say in your subject line, rather include it in the pre-header text. And also a tip for your subject line is never include the word newsletter. That will actually make open rates drop by 19%. Then also, sorry, just make use of A/B testing for subject lines. So what's nice there, if you have a few subject lines that you are unsure of that will perform the best, use the A/B testing, put in 2 or 3 different subject lines, and you will see what subject line actually received the most open rates. And then avoid spammy words, such as discount. Avoid special characters and avoid caps. And number 10, the most talked about feature in the last couple of months is the papaya. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I think everyone is sick of receiving papaya emails by now, but it is very important. So number 1 is make sure your email database is relevant. This should be recipients that has engaged with you over the last year or has actually given permission to use their email address. Make sure all your email newsletters and campaigns have opt-out and unsubscribe links in there. This is essential. So if you send a newsletter via our server, it always have the unsubscribe or opt-out link in there in that compliance block that I talked about in the first couple of slides. Okay, and your footer of your newsletter have to have your physical address in there. That's also a compliance feature that should be in there. And the most important thing to remember is make sure that your mailing list has been obtained legally and responsibly. And in short, that's to say that you did not buy your newsletter database. And that's a summary of the best practices for newsletter. And the most important aspects, I would say, is when you design and build your newsletter, really make sure that you look at that at the layout and make sure that it's single column so that it looks nice on mobile, and just the call to action and the subject line is really important. Okay, unfortunately that's all we have time for today. I did see a few questions coming through. Let me just go on this question that I have here. Someone asked, when is the best time to send out your newsletter? So it is, it's different for all of the industries, but I would say the best thing to do is when you use newsletters on our server or our system, there's an insights feature. So if you've sent out a few newsletters previously on our system, it will actually show you exactly what's the best time, what's the best day of the week to send to your database. So I think that's the most important thing, to make sure what your database likes to generally receive or open up newsletters or click on newsletters. So yeah, use that insight feature on our system. It's very helpful. And then got another question here. And they asked, how frequently should I send out newsletters? And I think just to make your newsletter always relevant, once a month is enough to keep your audience active. So don't skip a month, then they might forget about you. But always, if you have a sale or if you have a promotion, it's very important to send that out to your newsletter database. Okay, I see a few other questions coming through here as well. Unfortunately, we don't have time for that, but please send any questions or concerns that you have regarding the email newsletter system or server to us at activate@clicitmedia.com.